Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Random Drop. And I just really need to talk about Metaphor Refantazio. Let's get into it. So usually for games I'm interested in, I'll usually do a review if I think I can add something or I have something I want to say in terms of the game, right? So there's games that come out like Spider-Man 2 and things like that I just like kind of have nothing to say about it. I played it and like kind of agreed with like the general sentiment. Hey, it's pretty good. And there are others where I kind of really just want to say what I'm feeling at the time, and things like 7 Rebirth and so forth, or Notria. So I do play lots of games, but I don't actually review everything. Lies of P was another one where I played the game and I felt the same way sentiment wise like with everyone else. So Metaphor Refantazio is another one of those games. It is an incredible role-playing game that I really just can't add any more to it other than just say like the things I specifically like about it. If you've ever been a fan of RPGs or turn-based RPGs, this is a game you should not miss. Even if you didn't click with the Persona games, this is its own beast, and there's so many things about it that just really hooked me, and I think will hook a whole different type of person or people who didn't really like the Persona style. But that's more of what I want to talk about in this review, is not exactly the good and the bad, as the game is pretty fucking incredible with small little things I could like nitpick about really, but it is overall something that if you are into the genre, you shouldn't miss this game. Play the demo, see if you like it, and the game just gets infinitely better from there. It could definitely land on the list of best RPGs ever made and in a list of probably some of the best games ever made. It is an incredible and unique experience that you should definitely check out. That is my review of Metaphor in itself. So mainly what I want to talk about in this video is the things I really liked what Metaphor did gameplay wise compared to its past sequels or competitors, and what it did story wise. So I'm going to get really spoilery, completely spoilery, in the later half of this video. So for those who have played the game, I hope you do stick around, as this is a game I just really want to talk about and see how other people connected with it. What are their favorite scenes, who are their favorite characters, and so forth. As I beat this game very early, I put 2 fucking work weeks into the first week of this game to get it done as soon as possible, because I was so goddamn into it and I didn't want to get spoiled, so I had to finish it on my own. So let's get into my review of Metaphor Refantazio.
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to say if you enjoy our content and want to stay up to date with our videos, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. So on to the video.
So a big thing I really want to get into is that lately this year I've been bumping into a lot of games that I feel like are just stretched out and padded out, and I end up putting 100 hours into them for no real reason other than like this weird dopamine effect, or like, oh hey, I'm playing an RPG, I need to max out my character. And I started to resent that feeling, but then I played Metaphor for almost 100 hours with no issue, and it makes me realize that you could have a 100-hour game if it is paced out correctly gameplay wise and story wise, and that's what Metaphor is. It is a refinement of the Persona and Atlas formula down to a T, to where my whole time with it, I felt like it wasn't really trying to waste my time in any way. And this is more to give kudos to Atlas for them fixing their pacing issues, as past Persona games had a lot of ups and downs and lulls and in between, to where even the pacing was kind of predictable in a lot of ways, as you know, you do the dungeon, then big space of cutscenes, then dungeon, big space of cutscenes, and you can kind of plan out like how a Persona game is gonna pad out with a calendar system. With Metaphor, you really feel like you're on this journey, and there's gonna be ups and downs and areas you visit for a little bit and move on, and there'll be areas where you spend more time and get into the nitty-gritty and do more side quests than town and so forth. The pacing for Metaphor is way more unpredictable, but I still found value in all of it. I didn't feel like it was wasting my time, even though there are some parts that like, oh hey, here's another dungeon that kind of looks like every other dungeon. Usually there's some unique twist in that dungeon that kind of makes it a bit more special, but also it takes you like 20 minutes to 30 minutes to knock out that dungeon, and you would only really stay there if you wanted to just grind levels out, and it's not really necessary. I feel like the whole adventure took this concept of the calendar system and really just made a journey out of it, and made again that formula that they did for 3, 4, and 5 made it a bit more unpredictable and less clean, but they also cleaned other parts up, right? With like the bond system, where every time you talk to the person, you are going to rank up. And so there's not this weird micromanaging thing that you have to do, and more like, hey, every time you spend time with these people, you're going to rank up. Every time you try to get more courage, you can see the meter move up to know exactly where you need to be at, and so forth. There's a lot less time wasting things pacing wise, so you get less of that feeling like you do in Persona games where you beat the dungeon, then you have like 30 fucking days of you just social linking, and maybe half of those are rank ups and the rest are just like increasing stats. The daily calendar system feels like it has just more value, and the little interactions and the side quests and the side dungeons make you feel like you are not wasting your time, leading to just a really well-paced 80-90 hours that I spent on it. There's also a lot less time you fiddling with like personas and trying to capture extra ones and doing all the fusing. You do still spend quite a bit of time in your archetypes and trying to figure out, hey, which ones do I want to switch to next, which ones do I level next, and combine these traits and so forth, right? There is still that management system that you get out of it, and it is completely replaced the Persona system. And their take on the job system from Final Fantasy V is fucking incredible. It is so much fun, and this is something I just actually prefer, as I think the archetype designs are really cool, and really they could have just been jobs or costume changes instead, but they went more with the Persona flair of like, hey, you're turning into these mythical beings, these archetypes, and that's still a really cool theme as well. But it is just basically the job system. This one, the Seeker is a fucking red mage. It plays like a red mage. It has spells like a red mage probably would. The brawler plays exactly how you think a brawler would play, and so forth. So I really had really good time figuring out like, hey, what do I want to make my main character? As he's no longer a wild card, you still have to pick a job or class for him. I ended up playing more of a magic caster and dumping my points into magic, which is not something I usually do in RPGs with my main characters. I'm usually more of a physical type or a thief type, but this game, it kind of made more sense, especially with what characters they give you, to kind of stick in that red mage role or go full on magic. And yeah, I just enjoyed that experience overall, and then having the rest of the party being those characters that excel at certain things, but you could always tune them other ways as well. And lastly, gameplay wise, is the difficulty. This game is not easy, but it's not incredibly hard, and boss fights more feel like puzzles. As in every area, it seems like there's a certain level threshold that you eventually hit to where it would just take an insane amount to level past that, and at a certain point, it's hey, go fight the boss. And I never ever felt too over leveled for anything, except at the end, whenever I had all my traits and all my classes syncing in a perfect way to where I was making really broken shit. But that's the fun of the job system. You want to feel like that by the end of the game. With that system, you want to feel like you're breaking the game because of all these traits and how you're overlapping them, and with the gear and the items. And it's really, really fun towards the end where you just have all these tools at your disposal. But even then, there's threats to combat that. Not everything is a complete joke, and there are boss fights for you to test your mettle against. Especially at the end, there's multiple side boss fights that you can go off and chase to challenge yourself and get some extra loot that are pretty difficult. But they're not difficult in terms of like numbers and stats wise. They're difficult in terms of, hey, do you understand the job system? What are you bringing to this fight, and can you deal with this fight? So it leads to them feeling more like puzzles rather than this number thing where you kind of grind up to level 99 and then just out level it, right? It feels like it was designed to be like, hey, we understand you know how to break the job system. Come at me. And that's really fun. And there's some other side challenges and extra things throughout the game that knowledge is power in a lot of ways, where leveling and grinding up is going to help you, but if you don't have the correct knowledge and the correct strategy, you're going to make it way harder on yourself, which was a really good feeling coming off of, I mean, I've played every Persona game, so even base Persona 5, base Persona 3 and all that, they're really easy to me now. And then like with Royal and Golden, they become even easier in those versions. Like a lot of the challenges lost on me where I play those games on hard now, just base, and even then they're still too easy for me. Here on the normal difficulty, the game was pretty brutal at certain points. It does have the reset function, and the retry function and a decent autosave, so you're not like wasting your time. So the balance of difficulty and the safety nets they give you are a good mix. And then of course you can always crank the difficulty up higher. And I think now that I understand the metaphor and the job system a bit more, on my next playthrough, definitely I want to crank it up more. It felt like a decent challenge and was fun to go through. I never felt bored or completely safe running through these dungeons, except towards the very end. But by then, man, I had done every side dungeon and super side boss that, like, my classes were at the point of breaking, right? So really, other than the final boss, there's nothing that's gonna really challenge my character at that point, which is the feeling you want to have in these games. So that's what I liked about Metaphor gameplay wise. The pacing is always moving forward. The calendar system and the bond system is absolutely refined and near damn perfected. I really don't have any complaints about it. And the last 2 points is that I really loved the job system and what it brought to this game. And lastly, the difficulty, super solid. And it is, again, gameplay wise, pacing wise, difficulty wise, there's a reason people are raving about this game. It's not just because of its incredible story. Actually playing and moving through it and going on this journey is one of the best. So in this last section of the video, I just kind of want to do some spoiler talk. So please, if you haven't played the game or don't want to get spoiled, please back out now, as I really want to discuss my top 5 favorite moments in the game, the moments that like really made me connect with Metaphor in itself and hooked me on this adventure. So like I said, I'm going to do my top 5, and I think my number 5 would be the Dragon Temple, and when you finally go downstairs in that temple. And I had a really funny moment where when I got down there and I saw what UFO was talking about and all that, I was like, holy shit, we're doing this right now? As usually it's kind of reveal is like usually for the end of a game or something, or like it kind of happens in the middle of the game, which is really surprising. And it's just like a small taste and a snippet that's like, oh hey, here's the old world and how the old world used to look like, and you get some clues on what happened and so forth. Usually in games like this, a reveal like this would like take over the whole game and then it'll all become about the old world, but it doesn't. It very much shows like, hey, this is what this old world used to look like, and this is where the spirit came from, and gives a bit more lore about it. And it raises some questions, of course, about humans and their nature and so forth. So you start getting a lot more questions and no real answers. You're just kind of like, oh weird, how is this going to connect to the game? They kind of just move on from it, which I think is really cool. And I like that the characters understand like, man, they really fucked up that world, but we're kind of just doing the same thing. And that leads to the themes later in the game. And number 4, I would say, is the prince reveal. And I really like this reveal. I don't like that it wipes Gallica's memory, and it's like very convenient that like she doesn't remember, or her memory gets altered a bit, as she would be the one person to break the whole thing apart. But I do like whenever you have the flashback with the prince initially at the start of the game, the time, if you like notice, the timelines don't line up, as that moment is when the prince is supposed to get knocked out and fall into eternal slumber, but it also shows your character carrying the prince and holding him up, and then what, like 10-20 years later, now is the time that we're gonna go and deal with Luis and the king and all that, try to break his curse, and things like that, right? And then you're never in any of the cutscenes, and it always shows Gallica. No one ever mentions that the prince had this elder friend, like you would think someone would talk about it. And yeah, and there's some just timeline things that just don't line up, and it's just vague enough to where you could probably believe that, oh, this is the prince's friend, but there's also that something in the back of your head of being like, actually, I don't think my character actually exists, or there's something weird going on with my character and the prince, as they look very similar and so forth. So I think overall the twist is done pretty well. There's some parts where, like, again, the Gallica stuff and the memory stuff, but I like the theme of it. I like the overall tale is trying to tell, right? That your character is what the prince aspired to be, and that the real twist is that the book he's been reading is a divine relic. And whenever the prince got knocked out, he had that dream or that wish of being this person who your main character is at the start of the game. And it creates basically a dragon out of Magla who goes off to live that adventure, and he bumps into Gallica, and like things get set in motion to where Gallica takes you on this adventure to save the prince. Which I think that was the biggest reveal for me personally, is that there's all these divine relics people are talking about, that there's not just this scepter the king's magic, there's actually a bunch of artifacts that are like crazy powerful, and the fact that the tome was one of them, or the book was one of them, or was an artifact made by the king because he wrote the book and so forth, that it was able to enact this magic to create your main character. And again, it's going with the themes, right? He's the idealized version, the fantasy version of himself, like a character in an MMO, right? When you character create yourself in an MMO, some people make something that looks like them, but it's not quite them. So naturally, he made a blue-haired Elda with 2 different color eyes and so forth. And it's like, hey, if I wanted to go on an adventure in this fantasy world, I wanted to look like this person. Again, it's just more things that tie into the themes of the game that I think are really interesting and cool. Number 3, I would say, is probably the whole arc when you assassinate Luis, and then he's not really dead, and then he kills Forden, which is really surprising because I really thought Forden was gonna be the bad guy. But then you hear the necromancer's voice and the dude in the cloak, and you're like, something is going on, and eventually it's revealed, hey, Luis is still alive, and that the necromancer was able to revive him in time, and their plans continue. He gets the spear back and so forth, but also the whole events with like Rella being the one who actually put the curse on the prince, and it was Forden who forced her to do that, and how she becomes really angry and mean just to like force you to try to fight her because she wants you to fight her and kill her. And then it's revealed like, hey, she's doing it all for her sister and so forth. That whole section of the game, there's just so many twists on twists and twists and reveals that it can't be helped, but you're like totally stuck to like what is going on, like all the intrigue and things. And it's like a really solid chunk of the game. There's no big dungeon you go through after the assassination of Luis, right? There's no dungeon that's just like, hey, go and beat this boss in the next 2 months or in the next 2 or 3 weeks. No, man, it goes from boss fight to boss fight to boss fight, you changing areas, having more reveals and dialogue, to another boss fight, until eventually you just get to the last dungeon. And there are like side dungeons and things you can do in between and so forth, but I really like that. Again, it's how this game really just messes with its pacing. These events happen, and they only happen over a couple days, but it is like 10 hours of the game or so forth. This is like a really large chunk. Then you finally end at the last part of the game where it's like, hey, time for the final dungeon, and it's going to be like this massive thing expanding the whole world with tons of side boss fights, and you have 30 days, and the game really breaks out at then. But you can take it at your pace. You could do all the side stuff and then demolish Luis, or you could just go in and end this once and for all, which I thought was really nice, as the game can be either 60, 70 hours or all the way to 90 hours, depending on how you approach it. And number 2 probably has to be near the very end. I think I was able to record it, but I got like really teary-eyed, weirdly enough. Like, there's some of the themes that the game was talking about, and it kind of like connected with me and so forth on like this really deep level that it kind of started getting misty-eyed. And the way it's so like kind of cheesy, right? But it's like that part where like he's like, hey, live in this fantasy world where everyone is like peaceful, and like, you know, like that weird buildup that was always in this game where he's talking about this fantasy world, which is clearly our world, where everyone's the same race and there's no hatred and so forth. And we all know that that's not true. That's not how our world works. There's still a lot of issues that our world has. It is by no means a utopia, but that getting that reaffirmation from the character being like, no, I'm not an idiot. Like, this world you're showing me right now, it's not a fantasy, it is not a utopia. And like the main character standing firm on his ground, and you know, it like connected with me in like a really deep level, and I think it probably hit a lot of people, I feel. And the way the music swells, and the description of music was that there's no magic in this world, but music still exists, and music was the first form of magic and so forth. All that stuff was really good and really connected with me. You have that choice, you have that Atlas choice right at the end of like, hey, you can live a lie and live in this perfect world I have, but even then you have to tell Moore or the king that like, hey, that perfect world doesn't exist, and it's something that's not just gonna exist, and it's something that we're gonna work on. And the whole theme of dreams are not immediate. They're gonna take a while to work through and get through, and you may not live to see them, but that's how the dreams work and what makes them worthwhile. While Luis and the king stopped dreaming, they gave up on their dreams, and they want immediate results now. So Luis is like willing to wipe everyone out and turn everyone into humans and have this crazy battle royale where basically only the strong survive. And it really gets to that point of like he no longer is able to dream. After everything that's happened, he's gonna force his hand and try to make change forcibly happen, while any lasting change is gonna take some while. It's gonna be incremental. And the whole themes of the game, and how reading this fantasy book that like really try to get these ideas and make these ideas inspire people to do better. And again, it goes into like so many things, even like religion, right? Where like stories in the Bible or whatever religion you have usually are stories that try to make you do better, fairy tales and so forth. And yeah, these like fantasy stories, these fake characters, people try to idolize them and become like them. That question of like, hey, does fantasy have an effect on reality? And it does. Even these fantastical tales have an effect on people and how they perceive the world, and some of them can even inspire people to do better and give them ideas to do better and so forth. It's so kind of like really cheesy in a way, but it's like when you hear it told to you, you're like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, I really like that whole section. Let me know how y'all feel about it in the comments below, how you feel about the whole game in general, and what are your favorite parts in the game. But my number one really is Jaime. And the Jaime bond, the social link or whatever you want to call it, and the scenes with him talking to the mother who lost his child and so forth. That line where grief is his own death, so we will show you life, dude, is, oh my god, there's so many bars being spit. Dude, every single line Jaime says, and even some of the people in the Jaime bonds, same incredible shit. And Jaime himself is my favorite character, and he's probably one of my most favorite characters I've had in a very long time. Like, he is top 5 for me now. He landed with me so goddamn hard, and his whole story is whole tragic, and how he's trying to move on, and you legitimately work with him to get through it and find his answer and so forth. And his answer is that he wants to live, he wants to continue living for his son and take him to places he's never seen and live on in his name, kind of thing. And goddamn it, Jaime is so good. There could be probably like a whole goddamn video on the study of Jaime and his character. But the main reason I picked number 1 in Jaime as well, because that dungeon and those scenes is the moment when I was playing this game. It's like, oh, this game is doing something. This game is special, and I'm really connecting with this story. I was already like pretty good on it beforehand, and I was like, hey, I'm having a good time. The Jaime scenes and the social link, or the bond, whatever you want to call it, is the moment where I started being like, oh, I am really vibing with this. I'm connecting to this character and what this character is saying on a level that I have not felt in a very long time. And I'm not even a father, right? I don't even have kids or anything like that, but just kind of putting myself in his shoes and so forth and how he feels. There's just something about me, or a part of me, that just really connected with all of that. So yeah, the whole Jaime section, and that first, or not the first dungeon, but the second dungeon with the mother and so forth, and the human baby and all that, just goddamn, it got me. But yeah, Metaphor is an incredible game, and there's so many other things I really like about the game in general, like the party, and all the other characters are all incredible. Basilio is an incredible character that I feel like, man, I wish I had some more time with him and so forth. And I hope it's not the last time I see these characters. And there's things they say or discuss, or there's little hints that like, hey, maybe we will see these characters down in the future. Maybe there's another part of the world we can go explore as a different set of characters. Or maybe there's a whole game where you're just as the king, and the calendar system is you being the king. I don't know. But I hope this is not the last time we see the Metaphor world, or this world specifically. I would like to see more of it in the future. Let me know how you feel down below. But I really want to discuss, hey, what are some of people's favorite parts with the game? What are the scenes that connected with you? Let me know down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next random drop video. Peace.